Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have John Normoyle with us today. Normoyle, that is. He is from Irish descent, so am I. So we had a nice pre-call. Last time that we spoke about Bill Clinton, Meta, because he started at working for Bill Clinton, basically, which is quite legendary in this world for good reasons, also for the not so good reasons. I already spoke with a bunch of folks that work with Bill, and to my eyes, he's a phenomenal man. We're going to discuss about that today, and we're going to discuss about John's company, Content Joinery. He is founder there and chief strategist. Meta was a recent stint as well, 2 years as the content design manager. I have started to speak with folks at Meta, including Peter Rojas, the head of Instagram DMs and Messenger. So that was not so long ago. And yeah, Peter was quite the legend. And I'm very excited to speak to John. He had a very interesting career, to say the least. Started at Yahoo in Germany in 2002. So excited to dive in a bunch of topics, including, but not limiting to, entrepreneurship, AI, what's it like to work with Bill Clinton Foundation, and a bunch of other things in between. By the way, John is near SF in a town called Tiburon, which means shark. This podcast is brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to a podcast like this one, or even get sponsors, podcasts are pretty much at a peak nowadays, and I feel that will keep on growing. You can get to speak to folks who would normally not have the opportunity to speak to. It sort of like this excuse to grow your network, and also grow your network because you can get some leads and some clients off podcasts. And obviously, if you get paid by sponsors, that is a cool life. So podpire.com. John, long intro. Can you be briefer and tell me a bit more about yourself?
Charles, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you this morning. Loved our first conversation. Loved your content. Super inspiring. So what am I? I've had quite the career journey, but ultimately I'm a communication strategist. I'm a digital marketer. And 6 months ago, I set up my own content strategy consulting firm called Content Joinery. We're based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I did that because I've spent a 20-year career working in-house at the Clinton Foundation. I got in there early. It was like super fast growing nonprofit, like a startup without the revenue mission, a different type of mission. I actually started very much in the tech side. My undergrad was computer science. I tried to be a programmer, but I much prefer to work with people. I really like to understand people, and that's kind of brought my career in a different path. So I was part of that Clinton Foundation journey. We could talk about that later. That inspired me to go to a different direction. I spent over 10 years in agency land. So I worked in public relations agencies, brand advertising agencies in New York, and then direct marketing agencies. And that was awesome because I got to have so many different clients in tech and fintech and nonprofit and government and consumer. And even there are some of the brands I've made personally interested in working full time. It's fascinating to work for them for a couple of months. I then had an amazing opportunity to go in-house to big tech. I always had some FOMO around that. Facebook was sort of a North Star company for me, having worked in digital marketing for so long. And it was very cool to be part of a product team. And I think anyone who has an opportunity to see what it's like to be inside a billion-user company with billions in revenue on the line is just amazing for the brain and soul. And then through all that journey, I was also fortunate to be a co-founder of a home care startup, which brought me back to ground. And I really had to fascinating to kind of see how to build a business from the ground up. And I think that got me both kind of inspired and a little bit more confident to ultimately step out and do my own thing, which I've been doing for the last 6 months. So kind of a weird journey. It was never really the plan. I think if we had met even 5 years ago and you're like, oh, John, you should do your own thing, be an entrepreneur, I'd be like, no way, not for me. But I think career journeys and life is all about seeing these, forks in the road and these decision points and going, let's go for it. And I was fortunate to have a lot of very interesting forks and chosen mostly the right ways. I would say sometimes maybe not, but that's all part of it, right? So it's been fun.
It's like this podcast thing that I started, never expected to catch fire or to monopolize most of my time. At first it was like, let's just give back, which is very naive, right? I know, and sounds very cliche or clickbaity or whatever. And then I realized it was the best learning method ever. So my brain was like, oh, I am hooked. I can learn from 15 CEOs a day. And finally, it's like, yo, let's bring some scale to that. Let's capitalize on this podcast. So the podcast agency, the sponsors, and it's weird, right? Where life can lead you. But I've always been a consumer of podcasts. I guess that's where it really started. Is
Well,
it
you're also
natural? Yeah,
you're a full-time like studier of the world, and I think
yeah,
that's what I see in you. And I think if I reflect back, that was my motivation for agency world in
right.
particular. I think it has a trajectory that's up and down. 80s was the Mad Men era, and it was huge. In the 90s, you could make a ton of money. It was kind of petering out in the 2000s. But anyone who wants to work with people in anything that's around product design or marketing, like if you're in an agency, you get exposed to every single type of industry and how they make money and what's important to them and who is their target audience. And if you're someone like me that was like a strategist, brand strategist, digital strategist, you're sitting there reading about these people and what motivates them and what makes them tick. So that, I think, I was always kind of very curious about the world. I grew up in Ireland, as you mentioned, and moved to the US and lived in Munich during college. So I've always been very curious about people and the world and how it works and people and organizations and people coming together. And I think the agency world really gave that to me. The foundation gave it to me in a very different way because it was just so like we had basically one of the most famous celebrities in the world attached to us. And when I worked there, he had only left the White House 2 years prior. So this was 2003. This was George W. Bush was president. There was no Barack Obama on the scene yet. Donald Trump was running his hotel chain. There was Senator Clinton was a senator. And Bill Clinton was the most famous Democrat in the United States and this really global leader. So I got exposed to the world and people in a very unique way. But after a couple of years there, I also realized that when in my, pulling it down to my actual function of digital marketing, running the website, running our email fundraising systems, getting the organization on social media, I knew that my job was made easier because we had a massive celebrity and it didn't take much to get attention. I knew that was not sustainable for us. I also knew it was not sustainable for me in my career. And it's like, I need to learn how to sell anything really boring. And what was funny was I left. I was studying for my master's at night in strategic communications, purposely to understand this world. I arrived into an agency that I was very fortunate to get into, who took me on. They liked me. And one of my first accounts was for Bell Brands, which sells cheese. And I was sitting there trying to figure out how to do digital strategy for the Laughing Cow cheese. And that was my job. And that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because a week prior, I was sitting in one of the most famous offices in the world, one of the most famous people in the world. And there was marketing activities around that were difficult in lots of ways because we got so much scrutiny, but we didn't have to fight that hard for people to pay attention to the word Clinton. Next week, I'm here sitting with like, okay, how do I create a conversation on social media around cheese? And that was just an incredible lesson for me that I'm so grateful I had at that point in my late 20s to kind of pull it all down and go, okay, actually, how do you do this? Why do people care about this? Who's buying this product? And how do I make this interesting on social? And thank God I had a great team working with a wonderful woman called Nicole Delanzo, who basically showed me the ropes and kind of got me up and running there. But
agencies are amazing. I call them, I have three right now. I have one that is the podcast one. I have the cold email one. I have the chat GPT one. So like building a John GPT, for example, that one is trending right now. More on that later, but I call them my labs. So I'm constantly testing product market fit ideas on each. And the cold email one, it's just like, yeah, I have these clients, they're in X niche. We talk about targeting all of these niches. We talk about offering all of these different products. And then my role as the mad scientist is observe correlations, what works together. That just fascinates my brain. And it's my grand vision would be an AI to run that for me and tell me like, look, there's this major product market fit there in that niche. Hence, you should start that business. I believe in the near future, we could start businesses in 48 hours. And on day 3, I'd become a centimillionaire, because that's the type of world that we live in. Like it never sleeps, right? There's time zones in all around the world. There's different markets. The AI would auto translate. It would invest your budget, which I think is why it's important to have like good cash in the bank, so that when that AI exists, or if you can create it, well, you can just feed it the money, right? Because it will go on your Facebook ads account and all of that.
Yeah, look, I think when I listen to you and I read your content and reading everything about AI, it makes me a little bit nervous, because I'm like, okay. And like lots of people in knowledge work is like, am I going to get automated? I do content, and like content is in the middle of all these AI tools with ChatGPT and everything else. So there's a bit of nervousness going on. But I would also say that, having been in this, AI is completely different right now, and it's at this inflection point. We haven't had something as powerful, but there have been these waves before. And I was there for the social media wave, and it's like every brand is jumping into social, trying to create a conversation and have these amazing relationships with their customers this way. And it's like going to completely upend everything, and old brands are gone, blah, blah, blah. The reality is humans are fickle. And everything that you're describing with launching these companies and everything's so fast. And I see this already in digital advertising, and it's kind of sad in a way that everything has become so just like offer, DTC, there's like, we're losing kind of that sense of falling in love with brands. And consumers are realizing that a lot of the stuff that's being shoved in their newsfeed is like cheap for a reason. And, it's pain in the ass to return it, and it doesn't last. And there's kind of a wave maybe coming back towards brands. The reality is humans are constantly evolving the same way that Gen AI is. And we're very dubious, and we're all kind of like becoming increasingly critical of, or better able to analyze what we're seeing. So my hope is that there'll still be room for people like me to help companies and brands and organizations and nonprofits kind of actually connect with who they're trying to talk to using these tools, which are amazing, as I would describe it maybe as a head start. And one of my previous agencies at Epsilon, we worked with an amazing tool, and that was kind of how we kind of positioned it. It was like, this is a head start on our research. It doesn't do everything, but it kind of like cuts down that first week to get to something interesting. Because ultimately what I'm trying to do for my clients now, what I've always done, even when I was in-house in a product team, was trying to like be that voice of the consumer, voice of the user. And what they care about changes literally every day as they evolve, and we have to constantly stay on top of that. So yes, I'm excited for what you just described. It kind of scares me. I think it's scaring a lot of us. I'm hopeful that we will still have, value as humans. And that's what I try and stay on top of, is people, because people are complicated.
Right.
Like, politics and pandemics and,
But that's why AI, if it can like push something personalized to every one of us, I think it can be better than humans at understanding and communicating with humans. It's like us, but amplified. I mean, if I want to oversimplify it, I'd say like the 0.1% will always thrive. If you consider your part like of that as a high performer, there might be various scenarios that will not play out drastically. It will be like slower. It won't be instant, that's for sure. But it is gonna happen sooner or later. Just an example that is somewhat scary, and super exciting for me, but also weirdly, it's just weird. Let me explain. So there's like four efficiencies I'm working on. First, my brain, right? Like habits. Okay, when this podcast is finished, can I talk to John about X? Joining my mastermind, for example. Second is templates. So I send a bunch of emails. So I need templates, and on LinkedIn too, to send like stuff that I constantly send. Third is automation, and fourth is AI. So these are the four things I'm constantly working on. having slashed like 80% of my workforce. I've managed over 1,000 humans in my career. And I'm really bullish on the AI system. But where I'm getting at it, the third step, right? Automation. For example, my email campaigns. Yesterday, I added 65,000 contacts to my emails, and I have 35 mailbox sending like 300 emails each on a daily basis. So that's an example of like automation and how folks that are quite technical get like an unfair advantage, you know? So theoretically, I'm like 500,000% more out there than my nearest competitor. And that's not even talking about AI, right? It's just talking about like servers and automations and zeros and ones. So like imagine if there's AI onto that. I've started using AI, by the way, in these campaigns. So every person receives a custom email that says, oh, your mission is to impact 1,000 CEOs in the biotech field. So it is exciting. It is scary also. And last podcast, I was talking about a limit to that, you know, to tell the AI that once my bank account reaches 10 million, stop, you know, because I don't want to take more.
Well, what you're also going to be fine. Look, first movers have advantage. Right now, I'm paying attention to your email, but like, because you're doing it, but once there's 10 or 15 more people doing it, I'm not going to be reading your emails anymore. I'm going to need an AI to actually digest what's actually interesting to me. So you have an advantage now, but that doesn't mean that in 6, 12, 18 months, this is still going to be performing the same way, because the reality is you're dealing with humans, and we are all getting used to this. We can pick out what's written by ChatGPT. I'm seeing emails that are coming into me that are like, hey, John, would you like me to grow your agency? Hey, John, would you like to acquire? Like, it's like, oh my God, someone has just turned this on. I'm already ignoring it. So in the same way that humans have ignored advertising on TV and have ignored advertising in print and have ignored advertising on social, the reality is they will hit an inflection point where this massive engine you're building will not just get through, and you'll need to do something different. AI will drive it up now, but you can't always guarantee it will. You have a first mover advantage. I agree.
Yeah, the point is, I think sales and marketing themselves are going to max out pretty quick. So what you'll get is like this TV ads saying like, hey, Charles, I have the perfect supplement for you to increase your brain performance by 2x because I've seen that you run 35 kilometers. It not creepy. I mean, that sounds creepy, but and it's probably a bad example because of my human brain. I haven't thought about that, but it would be the perfect ad for me. Now, on the other side, does it mean that the business will actually have that very perfect product for me? I think they will adapt an AI system to put like exactly the right formulation in that supplement. So we're talking about hyper personalization on sales and marketing side. And we're also talking about the hyper personalization on the product side, and the product side will be 10 to 100x harder.
I agree. And look, it could be like, how much crap have you bought probably online the last couple of years that you've been disappointed with? There also could be a trend back where people are like going back to relying on friends and family that are actually trusted, the ones in their real life, to kind of go, hey, do you like that? You know, I bought clothing online because during the pandemic, you arrive in, it doesn't fit. You know, it's like the rocks off. I'm wearing a Joinery shirt right now. I bought it because I could touch it in this store near my house and could try it on. It's like, oh, we're actually back to old school shopping. And now that I've wasted and all this money on crap that I wore once or twice, it's back to the quality. So I don't know. Look, I think what you're describing in terms of the hyper personalization advertising, the hyper personalization products works well at DTC. There's certain categories that might work well. But look, I think there's still going to be room for that traditional kind of brand relationship, high ticket items, things that you keep for a long term. And there's still going to be a lot of money to be made in those areas as well. And those companies still need kind of marketing communication strategies that will work for them, that can't be driven crazy by AI bots to make it work. You can't have a hyper-personalized BMW. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, well, you could theoretically, if someone like, but it would be complicated, right? Because what I was about to say is that there's this company in SF. I think their niche is called hyper logistics, and they're basically literally a box that you open in your kitchen or some kind of drawer, right? And you get your items shipped in like 3 minutes. the complexity of that business. So they don't teleport items yet, okay? But
Right.
it's complex because there's digging, right, that needs to happen. It's like a tube. Yeah.
And there's also sort of like, we've all been fed, Tesla is supposed to have autonomous cars for how many years now? So there's also like, the metaverse hasn't quite materialized as fast as it's supposed to be. So consumers are a little bit like, I'll believe it when I see it. So yes, there's a lot of energy with startups, particularly in the Bay Area. It is a microcosm here. And I think we're all willing to kind of give things a go. People also have more disposable income here and can kind of throw money around. But the rest of the economies, it's not going to go as fast. So and we're also, a lot of these kind of examples around like direct to consumer type products, consumable goods, right? But there's a ton of money that goes into elections and people and nonprofits and government and transport, and there's all these other pharmaceuticals and research and education. There's all these other sectors that have tons of revenue involved in them, spend a ton of money on marketing communications that aren't all going to fit into this box of like, cold emails with the sale email, here's 10% off. And I do think that we can kind of get distracted by the stuff we see in our Facebook feed around the new workout clothing and the supplements that are targeting you, Charles, because you're an endurance athlete. But like, there's billions of consumers in the world that need other stuff other than stuff that's arriving in a box in their house. So we can't get too distracted.
Right. And one important point that you were pertaining to is legislation, like the decisions at the top are still taking a lot of time. Now, when we apply that to AI, I think they're sort of slow to react, that legislators, I mean, they've interviewed Sam Altman not so long ago, and that was like 6 or 7 months after that whole thing happened. They still haven't moved yet. I'm very, very interested in that part, the legislation and the ethics. There will be a lot of attention with that. And I do think it's going to slow things down. Obviously, there's no way that this would accelerate things, right? So, but generally speaking, try to limit the internet. Just try, like you can't do it. The very nature of internet, which is why it was so revolutionizing. Internet, yeah, is even more impressive than AI because without it, AI couldn't thrive. It was built for freedom. It was built, you can do anything you want in there. And I think AI is going to thrive off that.
And look, legislation is always going to be coming up in conflict with humans, because I think people forget that government is serving its constituents and its taxpayers and its voters. And they are constantly changing, and their moods are changing. And what's important to them is changing based on the economy and what's going on in their lives and climate change and wars and everything else. So it's not like you can pick today, September 13th, and go, this is the legislation we need, spend the next 12 to 24 months working on it, because who knows what the world looks like by then. So it's like, I agree. I think it'll slow it down, but ultimately, yes, the power of the internet and the communications network will probably propel us forward, and hopefully in good ways.
Right. And just for one point, I have another question after that, but you were saying that the brain will evolve at a fast rate too. I do agree with that. I think there's going to be major development either in, biochemistry. My first business was a biohacking business, so a supplement that increased brain performances, and you really did observe a solid 200% brain performance. Even now with my coffee, I wouldn't have that energy right now. So I think we're going to see lots of evolution there. Indeed. I also think that, once we can neuralink humans, it's going to be quite impressive. And I don't think that is that much of science fiction. I want to ask though, like, I've seen that you've shared like the canceling of the American mind. I've seen that on your LinkedIn. So it's like open on that question for last one. But why do you think the canceling movement is somewhat corrupting the American mind and or slowing down progress?
Well, I pre-ordered the book because I've read his other books and I think they're fascinating. I think that, well, the cancel culture is hard. Look, people are complicated. I think where it roots down to is everyone has a sense of themselves and what they're looking for. And there is people end up having grievances because of things that are completely valid. And it can happen no matter who you are or where you come from. And I think that these we're living in a complicated world, very complicated, hard world. In comparison to decades before, yes, we have greater longevity and access to food, and in generally we're more comfortable living, but there's all these threats and there's competitiveness. And I think that kind of every single person is living their own lives, and it's complex, and they're dealing with their own things, and they want to be able to see what is holding them back or what has created this thing for them. So I think that when it comes to kind of the cancel culture and what's happening, is like, it's very easy also because we've created these social media channels where you can kind of lash out in a way that was never possible 20 years before, where you can literally pick anyone and create a storm around them. And that has just completely blown things up. And I think as individuals and as communities and as countries and as companies, we don't quite know how to manage around that. We've been figuring it out. And sometimes people have gotten, megaphones that they probably, when we paid way too much attention to them, and we're just learning through it. And I do think that, I don't know what this book will be about, but in terms of like examining whether it's holding us back, and that's what I kind of care about. Is it holding us back as a country and as a community, as a nation, as a world? And where do these things kind of, unintentionally kind of putting blockers out there? How can we manage around it? And then it'll be very interesting to kind of learn if social media was a big part of kind of creating megaphones for grievances, no matter what that grievance was and who you were. What could AI do to these simple human natural behaviors that we need to be better prepared for, so that when these tools are available to us, the way social media became available to us 15, 20 years ago, we can better think through the consequences on our communities, on our companies, on our teammates, on our families, and then learn from that. And that's what I think I'm kind of interested from that book, is to see what that analysis looks like, so we can get better prepared for what's coming next. Because it's very easy to kind of get sucked down these roles of like, I'm going to build this company, I'm going to have 10 million, and I'm going to have a bot in there that makes sure I don't make 10 million. But what's happening the rest of your world, Charles, that you're selling to? And what are the consequences of the products that you're coming up with? And then you have to sit there and kind of, take on that responsibility. If you're so focused on like hyper, maximizing everything in your life, there's a whole world changing around you. And that's where I like to care about. And that's where I'm grateful that my career started in a nonprofit, where I was forced to listen to these conversations around the impact on communities around the globe, and where awful things can happen and it's no one's fault. And political leaders get in charge and throw things upside down, and it's not their fault. And there's climate change, and there's wars, and there's geopolitical stuff. All of that is easy to ignore when you're talking about a product that you want to shove in someone's kitchen that miraculously produces food. You're ignoring all of that. And that's where I think it's going to be so important for all of us working in this industry to kind of pay closer attention and think through the consequences of our products and our marketing, so we can hopefully have better outcomes as a result of it. I'm hoping that book will help me better understand what's coming.
Yeah, that was a politically correct response. My more harsh view is, and I mean, it's not harsh, it's just that like when you cancel people, you just remove them from the convo, and that's not okay. I mean, if they're really disrupting, right, and they're being trolls and they are a nuisance to the well-being of the group, well, I mean, it's just like folks in society, right, like public disorder, I think they call it. Well, sure, put them away for some time because they annoy the crap out of everyone. But generally speaking, people should have a voice. I think it is like social media companies' role to kind of make sure that the dialogue is open and positive and is leading in the direction of progress. So canceling people, yeah, definitely not. But I think capitalism corrupts a bunch of people, right? Like they are loud and they're trollsy because they get the views, they get the money of that, they get the power. And that's where we need to sort of intervene, not cancel, but definitely voice out equally hard opinions. But the focus would be on the tech platforms, how they regulate that.
That, and look, I think I agree with you. I think if a public figure makes a concerted effort to reflect on what they said and make amends and apologize, I think we as a community of people should be more tolerant and understanding of that. Then social networks can only do so much. It's ultimately us as a community of people, whether we identify as being from California, the United States, or wherever, or tech people, to kind of go, you know what, that person said this, they at least tried to correct, and let's have a little bit more forgiveness. I agree with you in the cancel culture where some public figures are completely just walled off forever is not going to serve us well in the long term. And we need to be a little bit better able to listen. And that could hopefully help. But we've been conditioned by these platforms just to respond so fast, or just block and ignore, and we're not really sitting with what people are saying and trying to understand them. And I think that's what kind of worries me with the speed of everything. Like, I love these tools and it speeds everything up. I know I do my best work when I pull back and I actually thoughtfully analyze what's happening and pay closer attention when I'm walking into a meeting with a client or a team, and I have a vision for where they should go. I'm not going to get that super fast. It's something that's marinated in my brain for a couple of days. I read something, I went into the city, I saw something, and I'm able to weave a story. And so I think all of us could benefit from like slowing down a little bit. When I'm looking at your calendar, Charles, I see what you're doing, like, oh my God, you're going so fast. What if you miss this amazing insight that's going to lead to something super cool for you to build because you're going so fast?
Yeah. Well, first, for that calendar, I think it's like different brains, right? Like mine, I've been given the gift on my mom's side from the ADHD gift, so my brain thrives on that. I'm also like extreme in a lot of things that I do, and I have a great back end brain, other than forgetting about people, I don't forget about their insights, and us, it's a second convo. So I almost instantly remembered you when you mentioned, the Bill Clinton thing and the Meta thing. So I don't think I'm losing much there. I'm taking care of my brain, and for that reason, I think I get good insights out of that. And we all have different backends. I think also like mine is about digestion. So for example, when I go on a long run, all these insights, they pop out, it's like eureka moment. It's really therapeutic for me to go on these long runs. To the point about cancel culture, last little point here. I think first, people go into fight or flight online where they feel offended. So the question is, is there a way you can't feel offended? I think exposure is good, but exposure with the right mindset, right? Because someone with that keeps on exposing themselves to that will get angry and angry, actually. Someone with the good mindset, which is like, online people have different opinions, and every time I see someone in a different opinion and I feel offended, I need to question myself, and this might actually lead me to growth, which is the right mindset. And then if you dig even deeper, it's probably the educational system that taught us this win-lose mindset. I win, you lose, like if you don't pass that test, I lose. And the classmate there that got 93%, he wins. I think from youth, we should teach youngsters to think in win-win. So I plan to deploy my school in like less than 2 years. And we should also teach them that, well, first, the word debate is probably not accurate. It should be more like conversation or win-win conversation, right? Like this podcast, I can have any opinions. Yes, sometimes I'll get offended, and yes, it'll take me a day, but the next day I'm like, that was a great convo. I benefited from that in hindsight, I think people need to stretch time and go more win-win. I think that would lead to a better society. VS like for example, the presidential fucking debate, it's people going at each other's throat. What the fuck is that?
They should have PowerPoint.
What is that teaching to people? It's teaching that I win, you lose. That's not how it should go. And that's why people, they mimic that, just like children's, they see these debates and it's like, that's how you talk politics.
Yeah, I think that the youth of today are thankfully not watching that debate. But in terms of your school, you're designing a school for a generation that's pretty different, very different to me, and pretty different to you too. It is unbelievably competitive for 18-year-olds right now, or 22-year-olds embarking out in the world. So I think that's where people like you and me, were different generations from them. We've had different life experiences. I think I've had amazing opportunity. I'm so fortunate to have had the life I've had. I think you've had great opportunities. But it's like thinking of them. You have to build a school for them, not for Charles. And their work, what they grew up with, having all of their middle school and high school in the thoughts of social media. Thank God I didn't have to deal with that. That's what's really good about his previous book, The Coddling of the American Mind, talks about how when social media got turned on in high school and college and what it did to people. It's fascinating to read. If you're focused on education, you need to get deep with the sort of teenagers of today and understand what they're dealing with in order to build them a school that actually work for them. I think that's what you and I and others of our generation kind of have to kind of constantly remind ourselves. What worked for us is not going to work for the people coming behind us. And we have to build schools and products and communities that are going to complement and support them in the way that they've grown up, particularly with the exposure to technology that you and I didn't have to deal with.
Right. And a solid back end. That's why, mindfulness and win-win. And it's a lot of mind stuff, how to think, and
Deal with
principles that will not
adversity.
change. Yeah. Adversity.
Hard, like my partner is a ear physician. I hear stories of the horrible thing happening to good people every single day. People who are going in with a back pain and realize they've got cancer. It is so heartening and awful to hear that this is the reality. It's all over the world, every single day, horrible things happen to amazing people, and it's not their fault. And they have to learn how to react to it and build their life up from it. That's a lot of the theme of the coddling of mind, and I'm interested to see what will be coming in the next book.
That's my great challenge. I'm not sure if I should go into AI or med tech, because this is like really touching and it's horrible, because you
I
learn that your
encourage you
life will be
to
different.
put it on a topic. I think you'd probably get more from it, and maybe education is your thing, and that could be amazing to apply all of your energy, the products you're developing, the financial success, no doubt you'll have with it, and apply it towards a societal issue. That's what I learned. I'm so grateful for the exposure early in my career, working for a nonprofit, international NGO. It's like there's big human problems that collectively we should tackle, governments, corporations, individuals. And that would be me. I don't know where I'll apply my energy quite yet, but I encourage you to think about that and to kind of get that message out. That's where I think we can all
Cancer
be.
is so scary, man. Like, it's like, will I die before I achieve my greater mission?
Your
Like,
impact. What's going to be your true impact? Content with impact. Content.
Yeah, you make me think right there. But we're on time. Actually, we're 13 minutes off. Thank you so much, John. Where can people find out more about you?
Absolutely. You can find me easiest at contentjoinery.com, or find me on LinkedIn, John Normoyle. There's not that many John Normoyles in the world, so it's usually easy to find me. Charles, great chatting with you.